Welcome. Let's see if we can populate this Argus output, which is only values, with some formulas so that if we start changing some of our input assumptions, then all the rest of it will update. This is a very good exercise that I've used many times over the years with commercial software. Helps you understand how the software is working better, and it also helps you do some calculations outside of the software if you don't have a license or if you just like to use some of the Excel tools. So with no further ado, my approach is going to be to have a calculation column out here where I try to recreate the number. And then I'm also going to put a difference column and a formula column. And I think the example that we used in class the other day, we already created this green table because there was no place that we had total unleveraged cash flows that included the investment and the cash flow from operations and the net sale price all in one place over here. So we had to put them over here to add them up. Probably didn't have to repeat these three, but it's going to come in handy when I do. And then in class, we pointed out, well, if we need to know the unleveraged internal rate of return, we could use IRR and look at this totals column. That was the whole point of making this table. And we get 14.08, which looks very close to their answer. If I took my answer over their answer minus 1, changed that to a percent, showed a lot of decimals. I won't use my shortcut for that because I have to repeat it many times, but showed a lot of decimals, I'd find out that I am as close as I can get within Excel's calculation. IRR is not an explicit calculation, so it's never perfect. We're off to a great start here. And then if you'd like to see the formula that I used in that later, I'm going to do this formula text and point it here. So first thing I want to do is copy these up and down, whoops, up and down. And the next thing I want to do, I just love this font color that is blue 255. So that'll jump out at us. And since the rest of this report came from Argus with Tahoma 8, I'll use that font. So it'll look like this will fit in a little bit better. So hopefully as we go through, I can change these negative 100 errors to zeros and you'll see the formula. Hopefully you've already taken a good stab at this. So I think I did another one in class, and that was to look at the IRR of this column. Okay, virtually no error. That's going to get hard to look at. If I get within 5 decimal places, I think I'm going to be close enough. So Alt H9, Alt H9, Alt H9. We'll say that's good enough. Okay, so now some of these we're going to need some additional information that we could get from a cash flow summary report or something like that. But for now, I'm going to get started on these. Hopefully this is something you've already done, but if you got stuck, then slow the video down and see where you got stuck. Otherwise, I'd watch it on double speed. So you may have noticed that 3665 looks a lot like the sum of these two numbers. And so let's stop for a minute and talk about why that would be. Total return unleveraged. Boy, that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean dollars, it could mean percentages. What do we mean by total return? But by doing that calculation, I'm about 90% sure that when Argus says total return, they mean all the money that they got over the years from the cash flow and the money that they got from selling the property. Together, that's the total return that they're referred to. And then when they want that to the investment, we need to know what the investment is so we can divide that and see if we get this ratio. So it makes sense that the total investment is probably this 2 million down here. Let's try that. If I take total return divided by total investment, I get the 1.83, except my sign's wrong. So since we're showing this outflow as a negative, I'll come up here and put a negative in front of that. And look at that. It's not really that close. It's close. It's within 0.2%. I would like it to be much closer. And through a little bit of experimenting, I found that if I will round that number to 2 decimal places, then it's spot on. So while Argus probably calculated that more accurately than to 2 decimal places, if I want a formula that's going to match it, I need to go ahead and round. Not a problem. I'm going to round it just in case I have to use that value elsewhere. I don't think I do. Okay, next question is, what is the present value of the unlevered cash flow? And this one may have tricked you a little bit. Number one, you need to decide which discount rate to use over here. Well, unlevered cash flow rate sounds like a good discount rate to use for unlevered cash flow to get the PV. However, what probably threw you, certainly threw me the first time I did it, is if I come out here, I need to find the cash flows. So I need to think about, do I want to include the first one or not? Let me try it including that. That's not the right answer. Let me try it not including that. Looks like that's the right answer. So that's actually not the one that threw me, but I'll get there in a bit. So this net present value, remember that one of the 2 quirks about the NPV function is the biggest quirk by far is that it discounts that first number that you give it. So I certainly don't want it discounting something that happened at time 0. But in this case, I don't mind it discounting something that happened 1 year from time 0. In fact, I want it to. So technically, if you took my modeling class, we'd probably want to add in this time 0 investment. I think it's always going to be 0, so I'm not too worried about it, but I'm going to add it in just for the heck of it. Okay, now we need the PV of the sales price. You could probably calculate that using PV, but I'd really like to do it the same way, just to stay consistent. And I'm going to do it with the MPV function to show you the pitfall here. So this is the pitfall I was talking about. Let's say I wanted to use the same type of formula here. I wanted to take any time 0. So let's say for whatever reason, perhaps we had some sales in the interim here, and then plus NPV, except this time for a discount rate, I need something that's the net sales price. So that would be my unleveraged resale. We'll talk about the difference here in a second. And then for the cash flows, one would think you'd just come over here and grab these cash flows. Have to put a parentheses on the end. And I am way off. I'm 57% off. Well, save you some time and tell you why. The other quirk about the MPV function is it does not like these blank cells at the beginning. Watch, I'm not going to change my formula at all, but I'm going to come in here and put zeros. And look at that. Now I match within several decimal places on the percent. I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 in here just because. Now, I don't know if that's how clean, that's not very clean because I put some manual stuff in there. You may actually feel better coming up here with the PV formula. The more I think about it, the better I feel about saying if I knew the rate and I knew the number of periods, I'll just manually put that in, break a rule here for a second. And there's no payment, and I knew the future value, and I'm going to leave type empty. I should get about the same number that way. Not about, I should get exactly the same number. And then I don't have to manually enter the zeros. It's just a lot cleaner to look at the, did I look at the bottom one? Yeah, to look at that. Now, let's clean up that 5. Let's come over here. One way I could pull that 5 out of there is say, take what's on the left side of that. And how many characters do I want? I don't know. That could be 55 years or it could be 500 years. So I'm going to say find the number of characters by finding the space within that text, and probably have to subtract off 1 to do that, and I get a 5. Now, I have a feeling that's text. In fact, I could find out by saying type of that. And then if I did a Shift F3 on that, it would tell me, well, if type gives you a 2, which it did, then that must mean that you're using text instead of a number. However, I seem to be getting away with that. If I came over here to some other cell and said equals that 5 is text plus 1, it's giving me 6. I think it's much better practice to take something like that, and instead of letting it be text, let's turn it to a value. I can't prove to you that we need to do that. Oh, I can't even spell value either. I can't prove to you that we need to do that, but see how I put it on the right-hand side of the cell instead of the left? I just like that a whole lot better. So I'm getting a little carried away with odd stuff. Let me get back to the point at hand. All right, Alt equals is my shortcut to get sum up. If I add those two, I'm good over here. Initial investment, I'm just going to pull straight from there. Again, maybe someday we find a better refined way to like look up totals and find out what row we should be on. But I think for now we're good. That would be if we wanted to make this in a way that we could copy and paste formulas to a new report that we spit out. Okay, unleveraged NPV. Pretty soon I need to start talking about why we're using different discount rates on these. The unleveraged NPV is going to be the unleveraged PV net of the, or so in this case plus, net of the investment. Now you may be thinking, well, gosh, a lot of these I could have just used the NPV formula and come down here and use different columns. But if you work back through these, I think what you'll find is to do this present value, we used an unleveraged cash flow rate, and then to do this present value calculation, whether we did it with NPV or with PV, we used an unleveraged resale rate. So there's no column down here that I can discount with some 11% and some 12%. Now, why would we use different? These are probably not good choices, but I did 1, 2, 3, 4 to illustrate to you that there are different discount rates we can apply to different things. Why would we apply different discount rate to the cash flows than to the resale? Well, do you feel more confident in getting these cash flows correct, or more confident in getting this resale price correct? I would say, since you're buying the property and you know what you're going to do on year one, you got a much better start on this than you have at predicting 5 years out what you're going to sell that for. So this is riskier cash flow than these are. Therefore, I want to discount it a little higher than this one. Same thing while I'm on the topic. Leveraged, I want to discount this net sales price. Leveraged, that's going to be in C10, a little bit higher. I'm going to risk it harder than these cash flows because I'm not as concerned about or I feel more confident in my ability to get them right versus this one. However, all this leverage stuff, since it is leveraged, there's some risk there. So the leverage itself adds some risk. So I think in order, these are probably in the right order. Now, you could argue that, no, I think it's riskier. My unleveraged resale, this number is probably riskier than these numbers. And I'd probably agree with you on that, but 1, 2, 3, 4 worked out really well for me when I was building the problem. So just a little segue there, no extra charge. Okay, so what is that as a percent of my PV? That's looking again at relatively the present value of this stream versus the present value of this stream. So if I said the income portion, this 454 divided by the total PV, That's about 21. And then the resale portion as a percent of the total PV is about 79%. So it's just saying how much money comes from the cash flow and how much money comes from the net sales price relative on a present value basis with the appropriate discount rate. Okay, we've already done the rates of return, and that gets us down to the PV cash flow unleveraged. Okay, these next three are a little bit weird. What these are is these values divided by the square feet. So I don't know we don't have the square feet on here, but I happen to know that it's 5,000. So let me come down here and do a 5,000. I'm just going to call it square feet. I'm going to format that as an input because it's just a number that we didn't get from Argus. We had to go get it ourselves out of our Argus file. But then if I will come up here and take the PV of cash flows unleveraged and divide them by that square feet, but I don't want to show it as a percent, H in G. So I think that's the 90. So I think I also want to round that just so in case we use it later, I'll have exactly the same number that they did. So I'll round that formula to 2 decimal places. And then I basically want to do the same thing for the net sales price and the PV. What I could do is come up here and lock the square foot with F4. Then I copy, paste, paste. And that should give me these three numbers. And so what this is the different present values, or the total present value divided by square foot. That's handy to know. Actually though, I want them to be, so I'm going to cut these, move them out here, cut them and move them one more time. We're getting a little bit off in the weeds here. Do an Alt-H-O-I on those. And then let me compare this number divided by that number, -1. Copy, paste, paste. And that's how we got these. Let me come back and copy these down. Best I can tell, the only way to match these numbers is to just calculate them like we did in these cells above. So I8 over I10, I9 over I10, and then we could just sum them up to get the 100. I don't know if those are exactly the right formulas to use in here, but hopefully this conversation has given you an idea of what each one of these items is supposed to mean. And I'm probably hitting up on the limits of a long video, so I'm going to stop and save this as part 1, and that'll be the return summary, and then I'll do a second video on this other part.